Let me first say it's my honor and privilege to be able to conduct this interview with Justin. As part of my research, I immediately downloaded his book on Audible, and I'm really a huge fan now. Justin, you're a powerful dude. This is Michael Williams, folks, and you have the pleasure of hearing our conversation today.
Hey, everybody.
Justin, shall we just jump in?
Let's jump in, Linda. I'm super
All
excited to
right.
be here with you today.
Okay.
And I love that
So,
I'm actually in Baja and you're not, but your
I
background is better than
know.
mine.
Well, look, don't
You're
make me
like
feel
at the
bad
beach.
about it, okay? The
Yeah.
only blessing for me is that it's raining here and we need the rain. So, other
Yeah.
than that, I'd rather be there. So, I digress. So, Justin, you, I know you have a pretty incredible story as it relates to listening and hearing. I've been really absorbed in the Audible book that I've downloaded. And I wonder if you can talk to us about how listening and hearing really helped to change your life. You have a really interesting story there. So I thought
Mm.
that would be a good place to start and level set.
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you, Linda, for starting there. I think, what I'll say at the beginning is we have a lot of conversations, I think, often about change. We talk a lot about change. And I've lately been just focusing my awareness on the difference between conversations about change and conversations that actually change something, and feeling that those are two very different things, right? And so the place that I've been trying to step into more and more fully, especially with everything going on in the world right now, is to make sure that we're having conversations not just for the sake of hearing ourselves talk, or for having these moments to just name or be heard, which sometimes is important, but to actually focus us towards the vision and the mission of where we want to go. And I think today I just want to make sure everybody who's tuning in and listening and watching on the recording is that this is an interview, but Linda and I, our goal today is to help give you some tools that can actually help you change something in your life. And we're not going to know what that something is. It's going to be about you listening within to find what that is. And we'll guide you through a practice a little bit later to get you there. And it's really funny, like, to go with the story, sometimes people, when they say, "Oh, Justin, you're a musician," most people will look at me and say, "Well, you look like a musician. Are you a dancer? Are you also a dancer?" They can kind of see that. And then when I tell them, well, I'm also an author and a meditation teacher, if they're being polite, they normally kind of lean in and they're like, "Well, how'd you get into that?" And if they're being a little bit more direct, they're like, "Well, you don't look like a meditation teacher. You don't look like somebody who does this kind of work." And I get why. I had the privilege of, before the shutdown, one of the first stops that I went on my book tour was to speak at Google in the Bay Area. And I had this moment where right before I was going to speak there, I thought, if I type in the word meditation on Google and look through the photo results, you can go to Google Images. I was like, how long will it take me before I see a picture of a Black man meditating? Not to mention a Black queer man meditating, which I guess sometimes you can or can't tell through a picture. And it took 10 pages, okay? Before the 10 pages, though, I saw pictures of dogs meditating, whales meditating, birds meditating, all these different kind of things meditating, And so it's like, it's more likely for a bird to be meditating than it is for someone who looks like me. And the reason why this is so important, and I think so relevant to mention right up at the top, is because so many of these practices of listening, which is ultimately what meditation is, came from indigenous people and people of color all over the planet. And what's happened over time is these practices over hundreds of years got colonized, corporatized, and demonized in some way, and then sold back to us, people who are going over the struggle, in a way that we feel like, "Oh, we don't do that. Not for us. People like us don't do that. That's for those kind of people over there." But what happens is, when we're all coming back to these practices, and rituals and traditions that are known throughout all indigenous cultures of every single person on this call, it's not about what color your skin is, all the way back, we see that these practices connect us to our greatest source of power. This deep listening. We talk so much about intuition. and so much about knowing the answers within. But how do we get there? So all of that preamble is to say that, the way that I'm here is not an accident. It was just a way of deep listening and deep trauma after that. And,
Mhm.
I grew up in a home with gunshot holes literally on the outside of my house, with domestic violence and alcoholism and trauma. And, one of the things that they're saying now is a lot of the kids these days growing up in marginalized communities are facing a level of PTSD that's similar to returning veterans coming back from the war. But there's nothing P or post about it when it's day after day. It's like present traumatic stress disorder. And now knowing how I grew up and doing the work that I do, I see that that was the environment that I grew up in. And we all have our traumas. No matter if you grew up in the most beautiful home with all the money and the privilege in the world or not, we all have our conditioning that we have to overcome. And for some of us, that conditioning looks like problematic and like trouble. And for some of us, and I assume many of us on that call, that conditioning on the outside looks like something that might be productive, but it has a deep shadow. And for me, that conditioning, and I want to see hands up if anybody relates to this, was my way of adapting was to become a chronic overachiever. Anybody? See Chip's hands up. I see all the hands up, right? But what happens there is your self-worth and your validation and your achievements become completely intertwined. And we forget or we lose sight of who we are outside of what we do. And so I was that kid who checked every box on the list, not because I wanted to, but because I had to be loved as a closeted kid who was growing up in a religious home, who was being teased and bullied and all of that. So I checked every box, graduated the top of my class, got a full ride academic scholarship to go to UCLA, was class president, get to UCLA. I come out of the closet. I have the most money I've ever had in my life. I'm living like the dream, what looked like the dream. And I had this moment sitting on my dorm room floor where I was struggling with an eating disorder at that time when I was 18. And I sat and I said, how is it that I've done everything? I've checked every box, I've fulfilled every expectation, and I'm still miserable. Why am I still miserable? And I think so many of us have these moments in our lives where we try to change our external circumstances, hoping that it's going to change something within us. And one of the things that I've said over and over is if we don't start this revolution from inside, if we don't change within, then we can't show up for the world differently. This relates to social justice. We could use every hashtag. We could defund the police. We could elect a new president. We can burn down the whole system. If we haven't shown up and changed internally, we'll just build the same thing all over again that looks slightly different. And this applies to our relationship to all things, to everything in our life. And so I tell all of that to you because, I got this eating disorder because I think I was trying to figure out what to control. So I'm about 6 feet tall. I know you can't tell on Zoom, and I weigh about 160 pounds. At my lowest in my freshman year of college, I weighed 115. And I collapsed on a treadmill and got forced to go to therapy, which was a huge secret, right? And the therapist said to me, you should try meditation. So, okay, this is like 16 years ago. And I look at this man and I go, meta what? That was literally what I said. I was like, meta what? What is that? And you have to remember, Oprah hadn't done no meditation challenge yet. Deepak Chopra didn't have no challenge out. There was no apps on meditation. The iPhone had just come out maybe. And I didn't know any Black people meditating. And I thought it was worshiping the devil. Literally. That's what I was told. Oh, this is worshiping the devil. All those deities with all those arms and stuff. Don't do that. And so when he took me a little bit deeper, he said, it sounds like you're trying to find your happiness outside of yourself. And this is a practice that helps you listen to the voice and the happiness that's within you. And at that point in my life, I'm like, within? Where? You know what I mean? Like I knew that there was a God out there and there was this out there. Like, what is this happiness within? And that set me on this incredible journey that saved my life, literally. And now, I'm 32, but I've been teaching now for 10 years, 11 years. and ended up meeting an incredible teacher named Lauren Roche, who I apprenticed with. He wrote the Radiant Sutras and Meditation Made Easy, who I apprenticed with for 3 years. And I'll just never forget the moment he said this to me. And this is the end of the story is I was 22, 21, and I was sitting on the beach with Lauren, and he said, all right, kid, I want you to try this practice every day for 2 weeks. And this didn't make it into the book, but he said, try this every day for 2 weeks. And if this practice works for you, I'll teach you everything I know. And you have to remember, I'm like a young, freshly out the closet, black gay dude, and looking at this older white man in his late 60s, and I'm looking at him like, what do you want? Like, I'm thinking, why would you do that? What do you want? I'm thinking he wants something else, like my mama taught me better than that. You're trying to teach me to meditate. I know what you're trying to do, And he looks at me and he just said, in all my years of teaching, 40 years, I've never seen someone who looks like you and who's gone through what you've gone through, who's been interested in this practice. And one day, I think there are going to be people who need to hear your voice who don't need to hear mine. And I was like, and I think in that moment I said something stupid like, no pressure, because I was a kid, but the rest is really history. I apprenticed with him for 3 years. I put out my first book last year and have traveled speaking and teaching in over 40 countries now around the world, thousands of people, trying to spread this message of listening so that we can all wake up to the truth of who we are. So that's the whole story, Linda.
It's a good story, and it's a mouthful. And I think part of why your book has really resonated with me, because I think, to your point, we all have situations in our lives. Your story is not unlike mine in terms of trauma and the things that I've experienced as well. You said a couple of interesting things, and I'm trying to really think about things from the appreciative inquiry perspective. I'm going to try this one on for you. So for you, what's the difference between listening and hearing? And how do you know that you're hearing and not listening? Because I know what it is for me. I'm just curious about what it is for you.
Yeah, so I'll start here as it relates to the practice of meditation or anything like that to try this on for you all. And I'm going to say the word God, but you can replace that with any name of any higher power that you believe in, whether it's science, Allah, spirit, the universe, crystals, unicorns, whatever it is, okay? You can replace. And what I say, and one of my favorite quotes from my book, is that prayer is when you're speaking to God, and meditation is when you're listening to the messages coming back to you. That's it. Prayer is when you're speaking to your source of higher power, and meditation is when you're listening to the messages coming back to you. And so many of us spend so much time doing the output. Show me the way. I don't know what to do. I need help. I need help. I need help. And we've all done this, even at MEA, in these transitions in our lives. What do we do? Somebody help me. But we're so skilled at the asking part, but we have much less practice at the listening part. And so when we think of the difference between listening and hearing, is we hear things all the time. You might be hearing the walkie-talkie in the background of what we're doing right now, or you might be hearing, anything that's in your background right now. We have so many sounds that we hear all day. But listening requires attention. Listening requires attention. And there's so many different types of listening. Some of us listen, obviously, and the main way that we listen is through our ears. But so many of us listen with our bodies and with our emotions. And we listen to the messages that are coming to us by some of us seeing visions or in our dreams. We have a knowing. And so the question that I always ask, Linda, is like, how do we cultivate that skill of deep listening so that we can hear the message that's coming to us to shift our lives in the direction that we need to go? It really brings me to a question I've been wanting to ask you, Linda.
Okay.
So, because I know you got a whole bunch of questions for me. So how have you, because we all can think of ways that we've done it in our lives, how have you personally had a moment when you felt like listening helped you change something?
Oh boy. Yeah, well, first of all, for me, the distinction between listening and hearing is, for me, listening is physiological. It comes out of me. It requires me to act. It requires me to do something. Um, and hearing is kind of listening to respond. And I've really had to work on learning the difference. So um, when I hear something, um, I can respond and be rote about it. But when I'm really listening, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling fear. I'm feeling anxiety. So I wanted to make that distinction for me.
Yeah.
And with regard to your question, um, I, I'm going to go back to a time when I'm going to go back to when I first moved to California. I'm a native New Yorker. I always talk about New York because New York was my home. California is my home. Um, when I decided to make the move here, my mom was ill, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But I know that I had this feeling, and this feeling for me was that I had spent a good portion of my life taking care of my family, and probably up until 3 years ago, I've changed the way I've done that. I've learned how to set boundaries around that. Um, but I knew I had a lot of feeling around it. I felt a lot of guilt. I was almost shaky. And I made this decision that I was going to do something for myself, that I was going to think about what my future looked like. And I had to deeply listen to what was coming up for me. I had to deeply listen to myself, what the cues were telling me, and everything was screaming, go. You have to go. You have to go. And I decided to make the move and come out for graduate school, and I'm still here, and it's the best decision that I've made. And I do my I still try to follow physiological cues to move toward it, as opposed to away from it. Does
Well, and I
that
love
does
that.
that help?
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I love because you just echoed for us like the listening with our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And what is it that we're listening to in our bodies? And does it make us turn away from it because we're a little bit afraid? Do we push it down, or do we listen? Do we lean into it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I shared earlier today with the group that's here with the sabbatical sessions right now at MEA, we were just all sitting outside, very safely distanced from one another, and I had talked about the difference between fear and faith,
Fear
and
and I'm sorry,
faith,
fear and
fear and faith,
faith.
faith.
Uh-huh.
And so, fear and faith, what's really interesting is I said the difference between, but the truth is, fear and faith are exactly the same thing, flip sides of the same coin. Both fear and faith, listen to me carefully, both fear and faith require you to believe in something that you can't see and that hasn't happened yet. Yep, I just saw Diane put her hands over her face, right? Like they're the same thing. And so what are we listening to? We get the choice, right? Are we listening to that voice of fear? Or are we listening to faith? And I'm not talking religious faith. I'm talking faith as in the dictionary definition. It was just like complete confidence or belief in something or someone. And so when we cultivate this skill of listening, we have an ability to then distinguish between, okay, when I'm feeling this sensation in my chest or in my heart, is that telling me that I should go towards it? Is that faith? Or is that fear telling me I should walk away? When I have this feel, and some of us have weird things. It's like I have some clients that say, I always know I should do something if I feel a tingle in my right elbow. Like people have like that level of, but when you cultivate that level of listening, I have one where when I'm making a big decision, maybe not the biggest ones, but even some decisions and I'm not sure what to do, I close my eyes and I have this little system. And I know that in my mind, if I pause and take a few breaths, if I see like a green color in my mind, because I'm like a visual person. If I see a green color in my mind, that's go. If I see a red color, that's don't do it. And I trust it. because I've cultivated that. That won't be for everybody. That's one of my ways of listening. And so you will all have your own different ways of dropping in. And the way that you get intimate with that method that is unique to you is by getting still enough to start to get to know it and form a relationship with it through meditation.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I want to switch gears a little bit, if you don't mind,
Which,
because as I mentioned earlier, I've been listening to your book on Audible, and it's titled "Stay Woke," and the subtitle is "A Meditation Guide for the Rest of Us." So, I, I was the latter part of that was I was really curious about. Say more about what you mean a meditation guide for the rest of us. Who's the rest of us? What's the rest of us?
that's a really good question, Linda. Thank you. So, my book, I have it here. I have my really tattered version of the book that's been traveling around in my backpack. Well, not traveling very far, actually, because I've been sitting at home for 6 months. But there's a section of the book that I would actually love to just read, if that's okay, to you. So,
Yeah.
my publisher, Sounds True, when I was almost done writing the book, they asked me that same question. They said, "Who's the rest of us?" And I remember in that moment, I was kind of afraid. Oh, I don't want to leave people out. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to, I want to
Do.
be specific, but I don't want to leave people out. I want to be inclusive. And they said, no, you know what you mean. Who's the rest of us? And so these are the first 2 pages of the book. I'll just read this to you. It says this: we close our eyes and we can see a life we haven't started living yet. We can see the people we know we were put on this earth to be, and we all know that we were born to do something incredible. We can feel it inside. We can see the mother we've always wanted to be, the lover we've always wanted to be, the father, the entrepreneur, the dancer, the artist, the actor, the singer, the leader, the relationship we've always wanted, the business idea we always think about. But we spend so much time sitting on the sidelines waiting for the right moment. And we sit and we wait because when we were younger, somebody told us that dream you have, that dream is not for you. It's not for you because you're too fat or too old or too ugly or too gay or not good enough, or you should have tried it before you had kids, or you're not educated enough, or you're too skinny or too black, or my favorite, people
Mm,
like us just don't do that.
mm.
Whatever. They told us we weren't good enough and we believed them. I have a confession to make. This is not really a meditation book. Yes, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about meditation. But if you came looking for your typical hippie type Zen meditation book, you are in the wrong place. And that's because this book is for people who are overwhelmed with obsessive thinking. This is who it's for now. For people who are dealing with so much anxiety and stress that they have trouble sleeping. For people who have felt ashamed, wounded, not good enough, silenced, or marginalized. For people who feel like there's something missing in their life but can't figure out what the hell it is.
Mm.
This book will help you pinpoint that wound, heal it, and use it as fuel to live the life you've always dreamed of. But most importantly, this book is for us, for the people. For my Black brothers and sisters, this is for you. For my LGBTQIA plus family, this is for you. For my women who've had enough, this is for you. For my starving artists and workaholic creatives, this is for you. For my conscious entrepreneurs who want to make an impact in the world, this is for you. For those who've been discriminated against for their otherness, this is for you. For my social justice warriors, this is for you. For my tree loving planet savers, this is for you. And for all people of color and everyone else who's woke enough to understand why I'm even pointing that out in the first place, this is for you.
Yes. That was deep. That
And
was
you know, I think
really,
we can find
really
ourselves in there. We can
deep.
find ourselves in there. And at one point in time, I think we needed to have that level of distinction.
Yeah.
But now, as we see what's happening in the world, I think people kind of get it. You know, like we
Yeah.
have actually come together as this community of those of us who care about the environment and justice and equality. And so, how can we empower ourselves, have an impact on the world and on our lives and on our families, just as much as these industries that are tearing down our planet?
Yeah, I remember reading that in your book, and I thought I was amazed by it. it brings me to something you said earlier about change, and we're in a period of huge change. So how do you know the difference between a discussion about change and a discussion that changes things? Is
It's a
that
really
clear? A
Yep.
discussion about change versus a discussion that changes things.
Yeah. Yes. And so here's the deal. When we're just sitting here, so even with meditation, for example, I'll use meditation as like a clear example because it's a practice that people often wouldn't think of as something that actually produces change, right? Like we think of this as a practice where we
Mm,
sit here
mhm.
and maybe we send love and light, which we should continue doing, or we're, meditating on loving kindness, which we should continue doing. But if
Yes.
that was enough, it ain't enough. Number one, you know what I mean? And number two, like if it was enough, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in the world. And so the question to me becomes with every conversation that we're having, how do you use this conversation and implement something into, check me here, who you are being in the world? Notice that I'm saying who you're being and not just what you're doing. We're all doing so much all the time already. So it can't just be about the doing.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into this in our practice. We're going to do a short little practice in a little in a little bit. But I talked in the beginning about the change has to start within. And
Hmm.
I'll give just a very practical example. I said this earlier today. And I speak a lot to high school students, so I don't normally get to use this example. So I'm appreciating being here with you all today. So, and that's by the way why I'm like, I came to MEA in 2018, and people are like, "You're 30. Why
Hmm.
are you at MEA?" And the thing is I've been mentoring junior high and high school students for years now, and so I'm in that position, of the mentee, mentor, mentern, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, all the
Yeah.
time. And just a very clear example. How many of y'all have been in a relationship with somebody, whether it's romantic or not, got out of that relationship because you realized it wasn't right for you anymore, and then got into a new relationship with a completely different person, and soon after a few months and realize you're in the same relationship but with a different person? Raise your hand. I
Oh
know
yeah.
we've all been there, right? same
Oh yeah.
same damn relationship, same problems, same conversation, same stuff, right? And that's because you may have done all the therapy in the world. You may have sat and talked and talked and talked and read and podcasts and listened, but if you haven't changed who you are being, how you are showing up for what you do, then we can't shift the relationship at all. It's impossible. And so that applies to your relationship to people, life, to social justice, to your kids, to your art, to your finances, to your business. And so when I talk conversations about change, I love that you asked this. I'm not telling people to go out and do something different often. I'm telling them to change how they're doing what they're doing and the intention of what they're doing, because that will actually shift the outcome of what's happening. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, and I really love and appreciate the piece about how are you showing up in the world, kind of what are you doing. I tend to be a lurker in a lot of places, and I so deeply listen to myself that it, it's sort of about radical autonomy. You know what I mean? It's kind of like radical authority, just kind of really holding myself accountable in ways that um, it's action oriented.
Yeah.
I've learned to really do that outside of the spectrum of work.
Yeah.
Um, but you talked about, again, you're bringing it back to change, and I love that.
Can I
MEA
ask
is
you a
about
question about change?
transformation. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Can I ask you a question, Linda, about change and MEA? Because I know
Yeah. Sure.
you're doing, you just mentioned MEA, and you're doing so much work here with MEA as it relates to diversity and inclusion. And opening hearts. I just heard a great story of how you opened up someone's heart really in a big way when you were here last time. And I'm just curious on how has MEA and the work that you're doing here helped MEA show up in this transition to make the property and make everything that's happening more welcoming and more diverse? Like what in the DEI place like has been done, and what more are we looking to of what will be done in the future?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and thank you for that compliment. It feels good knowing that I have impact. I'm having some impact on the organization and people's lives. I yeah, I
You've had more than impact. I mean, you've really made a big difference. I've heard
I'm
from every single person that I've talked to here
well,
just
thank
how.
you. I'm learning. Part of my listening to myself is learning how to take that in, and be in a good place with it without getting all like this and shy and all of that googly stuff. But to answer your question, here's what I will tell you. Initially, when I came to an MEA, and I was there twice, would love to be there as soon as COVID is over. But my first trip was in March of 2019, and I was amazed by just the decor of the place. Just, I mean, you're in Mexico and you expect to see, a Mexican kind of theme and decor, but going into some of the rooms, going into, the room with circle and all over the campus, I saw a lot of cultures represented there. So from an aesthetic perspective, it really put me at ease. And, I came to MEA and it was not in a great, it was not in a great place. And then, something happened and my compadres talked about how I embody the discussion around DEI. Um, and to their credit, Christine asked if I would do some training for the staff. That was an ask. It wasn't something I offered, that was an ask. So that first and foremost told me they were serious about it. And I've conducted a couple of trainings for them. But the other part of it, I would say, is that there's something about really being seen. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, when the situation with George Floyd and when he got murdered, and how um, Chip had another webcast going for an ageism piece, and he let us come in. He told us all. He invited us all to come to that webcast. It wasn't a mastery session or anything like that, and he gave us the floor. He gave us the floor, and everyone had something to say. Everyone was able, and I'll speak for myself, but to speak from a place of authenticity. Um, it was a safe environment. I think people felt heard, people felt held, and that said a lot to me. When I say us, I really mean the community. I mean everyone. So we were able to just really talk about it, and it was people of color. It was focused. We felt heard. We felt seen, and that was instrumental for me, hands down, hands down. That said to me, this is a community I want to be a part of. The other part that I would talk about from just an inclusion perspective is that they've done a lot and are still working to do a lot to make sure that people across all walks of life can attend MEA. And for a while, they gave out scholarships pretty generously. Gave out scholarships. That's inclusiveness. That's wanting people to be there. Um, there are things happening now that I don't want to speak to, but it's always from that perspective of who can we include. And to be honest with you, just to be 100% transparent, I've had conversations about, I feel we could be doing a little bit more in this area, and I'm not seeing this in that area. And it's been, difficult, and difficult in the sense of um, awkward, but I've never felt like I didn't have a space for people to hear me. And that was represented with the Pearl Award that I received. But one last piece is the one delta that I would say. and that's Delta. That's never mind. Um, I came in March 2019, and because I'm about inclusiveness, and my wife is director of disability services where she worked, I didn't see a lot by way of ramps for people physically, um, in hampered in wheelchairs and stuff like that. And I know they're going to get there. Things take time, but yeah, I think MEA is really on a path to making that part of the strategic plan, and it's a pillar of the organization, and I really believe they're going to be recognized, and they're going to be able to stand apart from the other folks that do the holistic type of stuff.
Yeah.
So important question. Thank you.
And as you're saying that, I love, Linda, how you're landing in this role. Like I'm just hearing you say they, and I'm wanting you to say we,
Yes,
because
yes,
you
yes,
are an
yes,
essential part of that. And I even feel like MEA
yeah.
is like, this is a community for all of us, all of
You're
us
right. You're
here
right. Thank
together.
you.
Yeah. And this is just, it's a part of you like taking it in. You know what I
It,
mean? That
it is taking. It is really. It's why I said earlier. It is part of me taking it in, and I when I said about becoming a fan, it's true. I'm learning from you as much as I learned from this community. But I want to cycle back to something that you said in terms of again change, and because we're about transition, right? We're about wisdom. We're about making an impact in people's lives and helping people along that path. um, Chip uses this term mentor a lot, right? I think we're all familiar with what that term is. And you're a millennial, and I know that for me, and I may and I make up. There's a lot of people on the call that might feel challenged by how do we bridge this gap with um, not just millennials, but you've got those Gen Zers out there that we're passing the torch to, and they're marching and they're doing all of that stuff. And there's all this wisdom here for that kind of mentor relationship. What are your thoughts about what we can do, vice versa, outward and inward, to kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, this is beautiful. So the first thing that I'm going to just name about this, that I'll just say it this way, is forget about a fucking gap. Like drop the gap. Like the fact that you're already thinking of it as a gap
I'm
is
sorry.
problem one. You know what I
I've got to
mean?
get in there. I got it. That was a mic drop response. Justin,
Boom.
drop the mic.
The gap. Just
Go ahead,
drop
my
the gap.
friend.
Like it's everything with politics and everything that we're talking about. How do we talk across the divide? How do we bridge the gap of this and that? And I just wrote this article, during the week that we were kind of waiting in the election. And it was so, and I'm going to bring it back to millennials, but I think it'll help us see it more clearly from here. I
Mm,
wrote this article that it was so fascinating to watch on TV. This thing happened where it was like, is this a red state or is this a blue state?
mm,
Is this red or blue? Right. And when you zoom out, then all of a sudden it's like, well, this is red and this is blue. But when you actually zoom in, like
mm.
even this much, you see that every state is red and blue. Even California, huge red, all through California. And if you zoomed in even more, you would see your neighbors and all the people that were all mixed in, intertwined with one another.
Yes,
And
we are.
so we have this um, illusion that is what we're basing our conversations upon, that we have this separation of separate selfness based upon these societal defined boundaries that we've created, like Republican or Democrat or young or old or this or that. And that's not to say that we are all one, right? That's not to say that, because I don't actually think that oneness, whether it comes to age or whether it comes to belief, I don't think oneness is actually what we really need to be striving for. We need to be striving for intimacy.
Yeah.
That is greater than oneness,
Yes.
intimacy with one another. And so, what that means when it comes to millennial, mentor, Gen Z, this, that, like we have to look at the common humanity that we're all sharing. And this is what I see. Okay. when I have so many friends that are older than me and so many mentors that are obviously much older than me,
Uh-huh.
Chip being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that makes for an incredible mentor right away is when you drop the bullshit in the wall and connect at the level of emotion, of human emotion. Because when you can show vulnerably with intimacy who you are as
Yes.
a person, all of that starts to disappear,
Yes.
right? The age thing starts to disappear a little bit. And because we're seeing this common connection of space. And then once you have that connection, that's what's necessary first. Then
Absolutely.
you can start trying to teach or learn or do all of this stuff. But you have to start in the place of safety and connection first.
I
Is that
agree.
helpful?
Absolutely. I think vulnerability transcends the gap, and we just need to be comfortable with that. It's kind of your lean in moment.
A lot of my
So,
mentees, I'll say this really quick, Linda, like
yeah.
my mentees who are younger than me, right? Like I'm mentoring somebody he's 19 or 18 and a freshman in college, or he's actually going through a gap year right now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was fascinating, we had our first call, he was like, "Oh my God, you're so real." And I was like, and he's like, "I have this one other mentor, and every time I talk to him, it's like, he's not ever willing to talk about what's happening in his life or like just keeping it real, like you would
Yeah.
talk to anyone else. And I
Yeah.
think what happens is we start with this perceived gap. And then so we're talking into the gap instead of talking to the person,
I love that,
you know?
Justin. I really love that. It's kind of meet people where they're at, and let's get real. So I want to do a time check and make sure we have enough for what you want to
Yes. Oh my
do.
God. I'm
But I
looking at
first
the
want
time.
to check in with Leslie to see if there are any questions that people have. Any questions that you can throw Justin's way before we get to
Let's open
the
it
next step.
up. I don't see any in the chat right now, but if anybody oh, Jeff has one. Jeff,
Go ahead, Jeff.
please unmute yourself. I think you.
He's
And if
here.
anybody else has okay, great. Thank you. I'll call it Yenny next.
So I got a question about meditation. It's something that's always confused me about meditation, Justin,
Mhm.
which is in that quote around how meditation is listening. Um, I've always sort of understood meditation to be a practice of like clearing your mind.
Mm-mm.
Right. So for me, it's like,
Yeah.
how am I getting this message? How am I listening if I'm trying to clear my mind? Because I do find stuff coming in, and I'm not good at clearing it. So what's going on there? And yeah.
I'm so glad you asked this question.
Yeah.
And in the first chapters of Stable, I'm like wanting to look at you, but I'm going to look at Zoom,
Okay.
and I'll look at
at
you. I'll
Zoom.
look at
I'll
you.
look
I'll
at
look
you
at
on
you
Zoom.
in Zoom so I can see the
I'll
people.
move away
Yeah.
I'm breathing all day.
So here's the truth. How many of you have heard that in order to meditate, you're supposed to slow down your mind or get your mind to stop thinking? Raise your hand if you've heard this before. So how many of you have ever gotten your freaking mind to stop thinking? No.
Never.
No, nobody. And so the thing is, it would be like the equivalent of me saying, "All right, y'all, we're about to meditate. Everybody get your hearts to stop beating. 1, 2, 3, and then you looking at me like, oh, dang, I can't do this meditation thing. It just doesn't work. Like the mind is billions of neurons smashing together, creating thoughts. What we actually want, it's kind of like the propaganda of meditation, is that we hear we're supposed to want to get our minds to stop thinking. What we actually want is to get our thoughts to work for us instead of against us. That's what we really want. It's not about getting them to stop.
Yes.
And so, what I say, Jeff, that I want to just offer to you is that meditation, this is like one of the bigger quotes in the book, is not about making you feel good. Meditation is about making you feel, period. That's it.
Mm.
And so what happens is we sit down and we think that this practice is supposed to help us relax. In chapter 2, I go over these kind of myths about meditation. And one of the biggest myths is that we think that meditation is supposed to be a relaxation practice. No, it's not. Meditation is not to help you relax. Meditation is to help you become more alive. And so to become more alive, that means you have to gain the capacity to feel the full palette of your emotional spectrum. And so what happens is we're not comfortable feeling sadness, or we're not comfortable feeling anxiety. So we push it down. It ends up seeping up into these spots in our lives where it doesn't belong, in our health, in our bodies, in our families, blowing up at your kids, at your partner. And so meditation becomes this practice where we're allowing our thoughts to arise, but we're not focusing on them. We're choosing to focus on something else. I'll say this last thing. The back of my book has this quote at the top that says, if you can worry, you can meditate.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think the other thing is that the purpose of the mind is to think. It
Yeah.
is to think. So of course, of course, you're not going to empty your mind during the process. You're going to think. Um, so I think we have time for one more question before you do your thing.
Yep.
Justin, we're going to get into a little practice.
Yep.
So
I think Yenny had a question.
yeah, we did.
Hi, everyone. I do. And right after I need to go because I have another thing in 10 minutes. But I love what you said about dropping the gap and talking into the gap and really stop separating and just we're the same, right? Like we're human beings. What I guess my question, and it's for both for Linda and for you, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and there's an understanding that people of color, I mean, I'm Mexican, so I can relate to that, but I think that sometimes the communication is a little different, or how we perceive things. There is this, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but saying, right, like I am colorblind, or I don't see color, which we know that for some people that comes across as I am transparent, you're dismissing who I am, you're just not acknowledging that I am different. But my question, I guess, and this is something that I have been grappling with, is how do we balance between recognizing and seeing the individuality of every person, regardless of who they are, how they look like, and that commonality that we have as human beings?
It's beautiful.
And yeah, so I think that I haven't found a way in which we can communicate. We're just humans. Let's just get together and work together and be together. With I still see you, and I know that you're a person that it's different than me, and that your history is different than me. And how do I honor that without just generalization? So I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Linda, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I think it's about celebrating the differences. I mean, yeah, we can have kumbaya, and I for one, to your point, Yenny, I want people to see my color. I want people to see who I am. I said that in a room full of executives at my previous job, and everyone was like, but yeah, we should celebrate our differences where there's that commonality in terms of being human beings. You talked about that, but there's also rich information in our differences, and we should be celebrating that. We should be learning as much. It's called cultural humility. It's about learning from each other. So I'll stop there and give Justin a chance to run in. Again,
I agree.
Watching now.
I'll just say yes to everything, like everything that you said. And you said it so beautifully, Yenny. But one thing that I want to just note in the words that might be the place where you're getting stuck is, it's like, how do I say that we should have all these differences, but then also recognize that we're human beings? You just said it. Like, that's it. That's really what it is. Like, there's no there, and it's not about saying anything.
Right.
It's about who you're being, like we talked about, and what you're doing. And so the truth is that we are all one human race, and race is a social construct that was created. The word race and racism didn't even exist in the dictionary 400 years ago. Okay. And so, like, it is a construct that we have created. And so, but at the same time, we have differentiated experiences. And we have to understand that when we can be intimate with one another, when we could talk to one another,
yes,
that we actually thrive in that differentiation.
Yeah, spot on, Justin. I'm gonna put an end note on that, and then I'm gonna pass the floor to you. Yep. It's about being humble enough to know that we don't always understand each other, and having that conversation. I love the way you phrased that. So Thank you. Thank you for asking that question, Yenny. It's really great. Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take us to the end. Let's
Boom.
do that
Okay.
exercise.
So we're going to do a short meditation practice, and then I might sing y'all a little song, if that's okay. But the song might mean that we might be like 2 minutes over. Is that an issue? Okay. All right. I'm like, because the song is 4 minutes long, so I'm like, we're not going to make it if I do both. So, okay. So
Yeah.
it might just be 2 minutes over. So I'd like you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. If not, then go ahead and keep them open, but just keep a soft gaze and place one hand over your heart, just releasing a little oxytocin into the body. And then on the count of 3, I want you to exhale everything out of your system through your nose. 1, 2, 3. Exhale everything out and come to completely empty. And now slowly, to my count of 3, inhale for 1, 2, 3. Hold for 1, 2, 3. Exhale 1, 2, 3. Again, inhale 1, 2, 3. Hold for 1, 2, 3. Exhale 1, 2, 3. And now I'm going to invite you into a short visualization with me. And I want you to remember that as we visualize, that some people visualize by seeing images. This is that voice within. But some people visualize by hearing, or by smelling or tasting, or physical sensations or emotional change. So as I'm asking you to do this, if you don't see anything, or if your image is blurry or incomplete in your mind, you're not doing it wrong. And if I ask you to hear something and you don't hear anything, you're not doing it wrong. Don't force anything, just trust what arises. Here we go. I want you to imagine a future version of yourself who's living the life of your dreams and living in the world of your dreams. Just let yourself go there with me for a moment. Like you could rub a magic lamp. Everything's possible. You have the body you've always wanted. You're in the house you've always wanted. Your relationships are how you've always wanted. The world and justice and the environment, everything is exactly how you've always wanted and dreamed of. And if that feels impossible, good. Because if we can't think beyond our current circumstances, we'll never be able to live beyond them. And now just scan around you in your vision and notice in this vision in your mind, in your own mind, are you indoor or are you outdoor in the vision? What color are you wearing? What's happening in the world around you that indicates to you that something's different, that you're living in the world of your dreams? Is there anybody there with you? Do you hear anything? Do you see anything, even if it's fuzzy or blurry or incomplete? Do you taste or smell anything? Do you feel anything, a temperature or a sensation in your body? And now I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer this question using 1, 2, or 3 words. Here's your question. As you look at this future version of you who's living the life of your dreams and in the world of your dreams, what energy do you need to cultivate more of in your life now, today? What energy do you need to become that person that you see in your vision and to create that world that you see in your vision? What energy do you need in your life now? Trust the first thing that arises. Then take a deep breath in, imagining you're inhaling the energy of those words, even if the words turn into a color or a texture or a shape or a light. And exhale, imagine sending that energy out to everyone in the world who needs it. To your kids, to your families, and to the people even you don't know, everyone you touch and come in contact with. Inhale, the energy bathes and soothes you. Exhale, you offer that same energy out to the world. And go ahead and take a deep breath in and a breath out and open your eyes. And I want you to realize, very simply, that was a 3-minute practice, how powerful what we just did was. Because what we just did is we said, here's who you are now. And here's the world you want to live in and who you want to become. And we said, there's a gap. There's a gap. And notice we didn't say, what do you need to do to fill the gap? We said, who do you need to be? Who do you need to be to fill that gap? And what I do in my book and in my work and always is, how do you then practically, obviously I couldn't do it in a 3-minute session today. How do you practically take that energy that you want to be and put it into action in your life? This is what the power of meditation can do for us. This is what the power of listening can do for us, not just to help us sit here and pontificate on what it would be like to live in a better world, but how to fill ourselves up with the energy that we can bring to everyone and everything we touch. And so I would love for you all to type your words into the chat box, everybody who's still here. What words came up for you in your meditation? And we're going to close out with a little song. And this is a song that I released with my book called I Am Enough. And what the song comes to show us is that, and I love this, gratitude, connectedness, love, peace, calm, beauty, awareness, freedom, permission, openness. And what I want you to know is that you, as you are right now, you are worthy, you are enough. And no matter how much you learn or read or podcasts you listen to, there's always going to be that little child inside of each of us who wants to know that they're enough, not just for what they do, but for who they are. And when we start to care for that child inside of us, it's easy for us to take care of everything else that's happening in the world. And so this song is called I Am Enough. And the chorus is, I am enough, I am golden, baby, yeah. I am enough, I am golden, baby, yeah. And that's a little Justin there. So here is I'm Enough. And if you want to sing along there at home, please do. Hold on. All right. 1, 2, 3, go. Little boy, don't cry. You've been in pain enough, no. Little girl, don't hide. You finally say enough. One day I'll look into your eyes, show you you don't need to hide behind disguise, no. Spread your wings, you're terrified. Don't be afraid, you're born to fly. I'm by your side. Here we go, say I am enough. Hey, this is the chorus. I am golden, baby. I am enough. Sing it like you mean it. I am enough. Try it to yourself, come on. I am enough. Hey, I am golden, baby. I am enough. That's it. I am enough, no. Ooh, oh yeah. I am enough. I am enough. Ooh, oh yeah. Hey, I am enough, no. Little girl, it's all right. You've taken the blame. Enough, no. Little boy, don't hide, don't hide. You're finally safe.
enough. One day I'll look into your eyes, show you you don't need to hide behind disguise. No, spread your wings, you're terrified. Don't be afraid, you're born to fly. I'm by your side. Here we go. Say, I am enough. Hey, I am golden, baby. I am enough. Try it with me. Come on, you can whisper it. I am enough. To yourself. Come on, Jeff. Hey, you can even speak it. I am golden, baby. I am enough. Hey, that's it. I am enough. No. Ooh, oh, yeah. I am enough. I am enough. That's it. Ooh, I am enough. I am enough. Listen up. Say, I am enough.
I am enough.
I am golden, baby. I am enough. All right, here's what I want to do. I want you to put it in gallery view and look at somebody on the screen, and you're going to tell them you are enough. And we're going to sing You Are Enough, and just look at somebody and sing this right to them. I'm looking at you, Linda. Come on, go. You are enough. Hey. You are golden, baby. You are enough. Look at somebody else. Come on, Soleil, I got you. Soleil, I'm looking at you. Come on, go, go. You are enough. Last time, come on. You are golden, baby. You are enough. Last time, we're gonna go till we are enough. We are enough. Hey, we are golden, baby. We are enough. Anita, Carolina, Carolyn, Ellen, Laura, Lorenzo. We are enough. Leslie, Christine, Diane, Mouse. We are enough. Jeffrey, come on. We are enough. Everybody say we are enough. Hey, we are golden, baby. We are enough. Laura, Leslie, Tina, Moss, Rafaela, Wanda. We are enough. We are golden, baby. We are enough. We are enough. Last time, say it. We are enough. We are enough. We are golden, baby. And I just want you to know, in closing, for me, literally, like last thing that I'll say, is just feel that energy in your body.
Yes.
Just feel it. Like you're enough. No matter who you love, no matter how much money you have in your bank account, no matter what you're going through, no matter what color your skin is, you are enough. You are golden. And we rise. That's what I have right at the end. We rise together. Thank you, MEA, for having me. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Chip.
So much, Justin. That was wonderful. Everybody come off mute so you can say goodbye. And thank you.
Justin, that was awesome.
That was
Thank you, Justin.
We
Thank
are
you,
enough.
Linda, Leslie.
Thank you, Justin.
It was awesome.
Jeff,
Thank you, my
Christina.
Much love,
Great.
everybody.
I hope you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
Thank you.
And I got Jeff singing, y'all.
You got me singing.
All right.
There's no turning back for Jeff now. He meditates, he sings. They're going to kick him out.
What next? You
Out of-
dance. Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Justin. Great job.